Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is Michelle Bierman-Wolnick. She is the Executive Director of Heart Gallery of Alabama. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you local Birmingham?
Sure. Yeah.
Birminghamian?
Yes, I am a Birminghamian. I grew up here in Birmingham, left for several years, but came back long time ago. And I am a adoptive parent and co-founder and executive director of the Heart Gallery. The Heart Gallery was started in 2005, and our mission at that time was to find adoptive families for children that were living in foster care here in Alabama. We kind of got that idea from a program that was started in New Mexico and decided that it would be great if we could bring it to Alabama and be one of the other first states. And the way that worked is that we work with professional photographers who help capture children in their natural settings, like at parks and at schools and that sort of thing, through beautiful photography. And since then, we've added videography so that potential adoptive families could learn a little bit about them. Since that time, in the last couple of years, we've expanded our mission to help recruit foster families who are interested in teenagers, as well as we have a mentor program and a Heart Squad, which is a birthday program, so that we can make sure every child has their birthday celebrated.
That's great. I noticed, well, for starters, this is November, and November is National Adoption Month, correct?
That is correct.
So our timing on this show is perfect. So I'm glad you're here. But surprisingly, I had never heard, and I'm a Birminghamian as well, of your organization. It's a great organization in what you do. How does one initiate contact with your organization to become either a foster parent or forever home or for a foster child?
Right. So if we have anybody that is interested, can always visit our website at heartgalleryalabama.com. And on our website, you can gather some information about what the process is to adopt. But typically, anybody that's interested in fostering or adoption has to go through a course called TIPS. And TIPS training basically is a 30-hour training that anyone over the age of 18 in the home will take. And that is there to prepare you to parent or foster parent even, which is the same thing as parenting in my opinion, children that have had a history of trauma. Because no child enters foster care without some form of traumatic history. So this TIPS class really is there to prepare you to, as a family, to decide what type of child we think we can parent or what type of child we want in our home. And from that experience, once you've gone through our website, we'll then, we have partners. We partner with Children's Aid Society, and who will do the training. All the training is free of charge. And they will, once you've gotten your training, you also have to have a home study. They're a little different if you're going to be a foster parent versus an adoptive parent, because they're looking at your home for permanency, to make sure that you and, God forbid something happened to you, that you have family that will support that child through their life, just like as though they were your biological child. And once you've gone through that training, I call yourself paper ready. You have a home study and you've been licensed by the state with all of the training that you needed. Then you would go to our website, and on our website, you can inquire about a child. And once that is done, that goes to us, but it also goes to the state office and permanency of adoption, and they will pull your home study to see if you'd be a good match for a child.
Wow.
And so that's a shortened version.
A shortened version of what I would gather to be a fairly not so short process.
That's true.
On an average, would you say 18 months?
Not typically that long. I typically tell people 4 to 6 months. It really does depend, where you live. So we serve the entire state of Alabama. Our children are even placed outside of the state, although we would prefer that they stay in Alabama. We just do the training for families here in Alabama. But it really kind of depends where the child lives and where you live and when the next classes are starting. Because if you contact somebody, the classes meet for 10 weeks. So if you were to contact at their second week, you may have to wait a couple of months before you can even start your classes. So all of that can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months typically.
And I'm sure there are background checks involved in
Right.
anybody that's attempting to adopt or foster any child of any
Yes.
age. Roughly, how many placements do you get in a typical year?
So currently, so just for typically for numbers sake, in Alabama, there's about 6,100 children living in foster care.
Wow.
The majority of these children are going to go back to their family of origin. The goal of foster care really is to be able to give their family members a break till they can get their home to be safe for the children to return. So that's why we need foster families. I don't know the exact number, but there's less than 2,000 licensed foster homes in the state of Alabama, and therefore these children, there's just not enough homes for children. And so they end up in group homes or facilities that they don't necessarily need to be in. And typically, the majority of the children the Heart Gallery work with are teenagers, and the teenagers are the ones that end up in these type of congregate living environments. So at any given time, we're working with about 300 children that we're trying to find placements for. But
Are,
the need is great.
the need is great. So if
So,
someone wants to volunteer in any way, they should log in to your website and fill out the appropriate paperwork to set things in motion.
that's true.
When we come back from break, I'd like to talk about um, how most of these kids get into these circumstances where they're in need of your services, because it sounds like a tremendous problem, not just in our state, but nationwide. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm talking to Michelle Bierman-Walnick, and the Executive Director of the Heart Gallery of Alabama, a fantastic organization, especially here at this time of the year in National Adoption Month. Michelle, may I call you Michelle, please?
Yes.
The children themselves that are displaced, what events, and I know there's no way to pigeonhole this, but there has to be some broad strokes that you can talk about relative to how they end up displaced in these circumstances. And as you said, I was happy to hear that the majority of them go back to their homes. But how do
Right.
they end? Is it drugs? Is it violence? Is it a combination of both?
Yes, we have definitely noticed the number of children that entered care. So Heart Gallery is about 16 years old now, and our numbers of children that are entering care are about the same as they were when we started. But that number dropped dramatically, maybe about 5 or 6 years into, so that would have been around 2010. And then we saw the rise of opioids, and that maybe about 3 or 4, and Alabama was kind of slow to the rise of opioids, or at least the remnants of the rise of the drug abuse, and then how that affected families and children being removed from families. So a large percentage, I would say, of children that are in care right now are because of neglect due to the rise of opioid abuse and addiction.
Wow.
And then just the historical nature of that within their own family. So a lot of times a child that enters care will then who's raised in foster care then ends up losing custody of their children as well. So it's almost a vicious cycle that the Heart Gallery is working really hard at stopping. A lot of people refer to our children as orphans, and the reality is they're not orphans, because an orphan is somebody who doesn't have a parent. They may not have a legal parent anymore, but they do have parents. Their parents just have a disease and were unable to care for their children. So there's that trauma, and then there's always the emotional abuse or physical abuse or just poverty in general that led to a child being removed from a placement. But it takes a lot. I mean, people, I don't really want to know their histories, because my goal is to help them kind of move out of that. And but nobody enters foster care or stays in foster care as long as our kids do, without having had some form of trauma in their background.
Um,
So
Typically, what is that length of time that they would remain in foster
a
care?
child that the Heart Gallery is going to serve is going to have their parental rights terminated. And birth families or their family of origin, so even if it's not their biological parents, but maybe there's a grandparent, they're going to be given every opportunity to get their children back. So typically that may take 18 months, 2 years, could take up to 3 years. They are trying to limit that amount of time. But with the pandemic, there was a shortage of caseworkers being able to go out into homes and providing the services that these families need to be able to get their children back. But ideally, it would be about 18 months that they would give the families a chance to be able to get their children returned to their home. And then the Heart Gallery's children, or all those kids, are children that parental rights are terminated and they do not have an identified family. And this can be that the foster parents that are fostering their children are not in the position to adopt, or it means that they were, and more likely, in a group home or something where people don't even know that our kids exist.
Wow.
Often our kids were invisible. Before the Heart Gallery came around, you would never even know these children were here, going to school with your children. And then going home to a group home or to a facility because they didn't have a place to go to. So at any given time, Heart Gallery is working with around 200 to 300 children.
You mentioned the opioid crisis, and I've recently been fascinated by a program that was streamed on Hulu called Dope Sick.
Me too. I'm not done with it, so don't ruin it for me, but I am
I'm
obsessed
not,
with that as
yeah,
well.
Michael Keaton does a great job in that. But what I wanted to talk about is the cognitive component to addiction. So if you're dealing with kids that come from parents who suffer from addiction, in my line of work, what I have found is there is a genetic link. Do you address that with these kids and work to get them educated on that factor?
That's not, the Heart Gallery is really not involved with that process, but I will tell you that I have the privilege of interviewing every child that you see on our website. And I will say that I've never met children that have been more therapized. These children,
Huh.
especially if they're in a facility, they have spent a lot of time with therapists, and they know, deep, especially because I'm working with teenagers, they know that what their why their parents couldn't take care of them and how drugs affected them. And majority of the children I talked to have no desire to get anywhere near drugs or alcohol because they don't want that to happen to them. That is why it's so important. We have a mentor program to be able to partner our youth with a healthy adult. So it may not be it may be a foster parent, it may be an adoptive family, but if not, to try to get them a mentor so that when they do leave the foster care system, and they age out or they decide to go to college, they have their person, they have a healthy person that will help them stay on track. Something that I think the majority of us don't think about, that we leave home and we always know we have a place to go to.
I don't know that we addressed this, but in terms of age range, we're talking kids between the ages of what and what?
I would say 8 to 21. It's very unlikely we have children under the age of 8, but the average age that you'll see that we're working with is probably 8 to 16.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to talk about some other things relative to who you partner with in those mentor programs. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We're talking about Heart Gallery of Alabama and what services it offers offers for foster kids in the state of Alabama and beyond. Thank you, Michelle, for being here again. What you do is fantastic. Uh, and I understand that you're not a therapeutic, that's not your job. Uh, However, you are, because it's a piece of what you do, you partner with others that lend a hand in that context. Who are some of the partners out there that you are engaged with?
Sure. So we partner with the state office. So people always wonder, how do you get a child referred to you? And why isn't DHR doing this? Well, the Department of Human Resources is doing this. As one of their state partners, they realize that they can't do it alone. So Heart Gallery is a community partner of the State Office of Adoption. And so we work with them to help recruit for their children. So all of the children that Heart Gallery features are children that are in custody of the state DHR, which means that they are legally free for adoption and they just need extra help with recruitment. And that is sort of our job. We also partner with Children's Aid Society. There's a program called APAC, which just stands for Alabama Pre and Post Adoption Connections. And they provide all of the training that families who want to adopt will need to adopt a child from the Heart Gallery, as well as counseling and supportive services from when the child meets or when you meet your potential child, all the way through, as long as you want, all the way through the adoption, post honeymoon phase, as we call it. They're there for them, and they're a phenomenal partner of ours. And we've recently, in the last year or so, started partnering with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And this is for our new mentor program. So Big Brothers and Big Sisters has a match specialist that's specifically working with children that have been featured on the Heart Gallery or who are waiting to be adopted. And we basically try to match our kids with a mentor. And you can do this both virtually or in person in a community based. We have some mentors that are not even in the state of Alabama, which is somewhat helpful since our youth move a lot. That's something people don't realize, is that children in foster care move a lot. And so being able to do it virtually has allowed them to, especially during the pandemic, to remain close and have somebody that they can count on, that they can talk to each week and help them through their adolescence. And so we also partner with Alabama Foster and Adoptive Parent Association. And they are also a statewide organization that helps foster families to make sure that their rights are heard and that the needs of our youth are being served. So they're there as an advocacy group.
So there are a lot of moving parts.
There are.
In thinking about what we're talking about, we focus on the child, but we also have to focus on the adopted parent or the foster parent, because there's emotional, I call it emotional goo, but that's just the way I talk sometimes, that's going on both ways. And it takes a special dedication to want to do what both sides are being asked to do. Both the child, who's being placed in a place that he's not familiar with or she's not familiar with, and also the parent that's being asked to do some things that perhaps they're motivated for different reasons. Maybe they couldn't have kids, or maybe they want to give back. If people want to get involved in your program, for example, me, if I wanted to just mentor, I'm too old to parent. Is there an age restriction, by the way?
There is not. I think that the definition that the state uses to adopt or become a foster parent is that you just have the ability and the energy to raise a child, but there is no age limit. I will say we have a lot of older, especially foster parents, who became empty nesters and decided they weren't done parenting. So they went back into that. So that is one way, is to, there's many levels of foster parenting too. There's respite care, which means, child's in a foster home, but the foster family needs to go somewhere for the weekend and the child's not allowed to leave. So they will go to your home on the weekend. Like, you basically become the grandparent of that child. So whenever the foster families need a break, you become their respite placement. You could be an emergency placement, which means you just keep them overnight until the social worker can find a more permanent location, or you become a foster parent, and then you're taking on that responsibility every day of that parenting. So that's one way to make a difference. And another way, if you know that you're maybe not ready to adopt and you want to do something, is you could become a mentor, as we mentioned. And it's very similar to being a big brother or big sister. And that would be somebody we have a very short orientation process that you go through, and everything is done online these days. And there's a background check, and then you get matched based on your interest and the child's interest. The match specialist will match you with a mentor. And I believe it's typically we ask you to set aside an hour a week to meet or talk with your little or your mentee. And this is really to help establish those relationships and help those children succeed, because research shows that if you have one caring adult in your life, that you are more likely to succeed than if you leave foster care without any connections. And I always tell people, like, if you think about what your connections are, our kids, if they only know other kids in foster care and then they leave, those are the people that they know to support them. And those kids are just kids themselves, and they don't know, how to change a tire or what to do when you run out of gas or how to buy a car. And so it's really helpful if you could be that person for a child.
Yeah, when you said what you said about how parenting is defined, or being a parent is defined under Alabama law, the word energy is the one that came out in my brain, because it takes a lot of energy.
Definitely.
And of course, people that are watching understand that parenting is not for sissies, as they say.
Definitely not.
I want to thank you for spending some time with us this Sunday. I appreciate what you're doing. It's fantastic work. And if people want to get involved, don't be afraid to reach out to Heart Gallery of Alabama. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
This is Our Issues Birmingham. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Whether it's advice on managing your anxiety or tools to help you stay grounded, Coping-19 provides a range of resources and self-care tips to help you cope with this pandemic. We can help. Find the resources that work best for you at coping-19.org.